On the surface, Nowhere Profit is a game that checks a lot of boxes for me. Coming right off the heels of Slay the Spire, I was looking for something that would scratch that same itch, so naturally another roguelike deck builder was in order. That's exactly what Nowhere Profit is, and it even brings some new elements to the forefront, such as a positional driven board and permadeath for your cards. I like a lot of what Nowhere Profit does, but it's worth noting that these big new additions go hand in hand with some big new problems. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Across the sky shoots a satellite that comes crashing into the Earth. This bit of old-world technology finally finding its way to solid ground gets venerated by the locals as some sort of divine object, and making a pilgrimage towards that object is exactly what you do. As you can tell just by looking at it, the game doesn't pull any punches with its killer art style. More so than any other game I've played in the genre, it has a unified aesthetic and theme that is damn cool. And more importantly, it doesn't let its art and animations get in the way of having a snappy user interface that makes it really easy to flip through turns. You play as the leader of a convoy. Each member of this convoy gets represented by a card within your deck, and a second deck that runs parallel to this convoy comprises your leader-specific cards. For card game players, these two decks can be more relatably classified as a deck of minions, which go onto the board and engage in combat with other minions, and a deck of spells, which can be cast directly from your hand to perform a variety of effects. You lead your convoy across a map until you finally complete your journey and make it to the fallen satellite. And of course, like any good roguelike, you'll probably do that a dozen or more times before you're satisfied. Each node that you move across on the map will consume your limited food supply and your just as quantifiable resource of hope in the convoy, both of which can be refueled at shops by splurging some of your resources to benefit the group. Basically all the depth within Nowhere Profit comes from its easy-to-learn, difficult-to-master combat system. The foundation of its minion-on-minion combat has some of its roots in Hearthstone, an automatically incrementing mana source, minion combat where the attacker gets to choose where the damage goes but can't attack on the first turn. Hell, even the numbers are similar when you compare mana costs to damage values. Where Nowhere Profit doesn't have a closely identifiable cousin that I've played is in its rules governing the board state and how combat scenarios play out into the meta exploration sections. There are a few systems at play that decide who can attack. The first minion in any given row on either side is the only one that can both attack or be attacked. This brings to mind a number of different strategies you can employ by using beefy minions to protect smaller ones, or potentially even leveraging some obstacles that are randomly placed on the field for defense. Where things get real crazy is that card Permadeath I brought up earlier. If you play a card and it dies in combat, it gets wounded. It's still playable, but will have adjusted stats. If a wounded card dies in combat, they are removed from your deck forever and can never be healed again. This makes the risk-reward thought process behind playing each individual card very intense. In any other game, your most straightforward play would be to play the strongest card you can at any given time. But here in Nowhere Profit, playing the strongest card also means putting your strongest unit at risk for permanent death. All of the thought that both board position and wounded cards bring to the table are really the appeal here, and you're bound to get a lot of fun tactical plays out of both of these pillars. But there's a dark cloud whose shadow looms over these cool new mechanics. You see, the depth that you have at your disposal when making certain decisions is great, but the enemy AI doesn't seem competent enough to begin scratching the surface of that depth. Whether or not your opponent will make a brain-dead move is practically a roll of the dice. And I don't just mean they're playing suboptimally, I mean they're playing outright stupidly. Sometimes they'll cast a spell that buffs all of their minions in play, when they don't have any minions in play. Sometimes they'll play a charging minion that could attack immediately, and then they just won't attack immediately. Playing at the hardest difficulty doesn't mitigate the AI problem, it just inflates the enemy health values, so the challenge feels like it's coming at you in the wrong way. In between bouts of combat, you migrate your caravan across the world map. Moving to each node on the map will trigger a certain event that you can respond to. Most of these events are combat related, but some of them fall in line with some limited role-playing scenarios. Each scenario will have you lean into one of the game's role-playing archetypes, such as altruist or scholar. Taking actions within such an archetype grants you points, which then help you make more decisions in that tree. This rewards you for playing consistently the same way all game, as this may lead to more options opening up for you on your ending. But by that same token, you're also punished for mixing things up. If you don't consistently respond to situations in the exact same way, you're going to be a gimped jack of all trades who can't take anything other than the passive, neutral response in late game scenarios. All in all, it just feels kinda rigid, and that's my other major complaint aside from the poor AI. The deck building aspect of the game just doesn't feel super tight here. Most of the deck is built out for you right when you select your initial convoy, and a lot of the in-game choices are made simple due to there being such obviously superior cards. There's a rarity system in place in the game for different cards that you find on your adventure, and the game is transparent in the fact that higher rarity cards will be objectively better than lower rarity ones. In small doses this may be fine, but a lot of the deck building decisions surrounding what you should add to your deck end up just being pick the rare card with the better numbers on it, rather than pick the card that flows the best with your deck's style. And that's a real shame because high rarity cards notwithstanding, it feels like there's a serious sense of balance within the game's common cards that gets totally shattered by the time you're a half hour in. Each of the different convoys you can select on the start of your run, on top of being different cards, will have a bunch of different passive bonuses, such as giving you random starting items or potentially extra points in particular role-playing trees. I think these are incredibly cool and help diversify each convoy choice even further, but I remain puzzled by the decision to not have these bonuses turned on by default. Instead, they are unlockable bonuses that you will get from playing with that convoy over and over again. This means that a major chunk of the deck's individuality is outright locked from you until you've played a given convoy for hours and hours. While I understand the intent here was to give players something to work towards, maybe the unlockable could have been to strengthen the bonuses, rather than completely unlock them from zero. I ended up spending about 13 hours battling my convoys through Nowhere Prophet's roguelike apocalypse. There's fun to be had, no doubt, but it didn't get its hooks in me as deep as I wanted it to. There's some awesome features here for sure, but the flaws underneath the surface hold me back from giving a wholehearted recommendation. The relatively inelastic deck building choices due to objectively superior cards and a lack of diversity between starter decks until you grind mean that repeat playthroughs feel nearly identical unless you switch the leader you're playing. And that just killed the replay value for me. If you end up picking it up, you will definitely enjoy the depth to be found in a lot of its cool innovations, just don't expect the AI to dive along with you.